The classical period saw the rise of many great generals such as Pericles and Leonidas, but none have been so successful or influential as Alexander the Great, the King of Macedon. From his dominion in Greece, he sought to move towards the Orient and conquer all in his path, making it all the way to the Indus River. But what many don't know is that while Alexander the Great was setting out east and conducting his conquests, there was another Alexander to the west heading out to Italy in order to make a name for himself. Today we will be looking into the life of the legendary general Alexander the Molossian and his exploits into Italy, culminating in the devastating Battle of Pandosia. As we are a relatively new YouTube channel, we would be indebted to ask for you to please like and subscribe if you find this video entertaining and informative. This will help us grow as a channel and be able to provide more content in the future. We at Diadochi thank you, and now we will continue with the video. Alexander was born in 371 BC in Epirus and was the son of then King Neoptolemus I, who co-ruled Epirus with Erebus. Neoptolemus had a daughter, Olympias, who he married off to Philip II of Macedon, who would become the mother of Alexander the Great. Thus, Alexander the Molossian was uncle of the famous conqueror. In 357 BC, Neoptolemus would pass away, leaving Erebus to be the sole ruler of Epirus, since Alexander was only a child. In order to protect Alexander from harm or negative influence, his brother-in-law Philip II brought him to his court, where he would remain up until his late 20s, studying politics and warfare. In 342, Philip would dethrone Erebus and place Alexander in charge of Epirus, viewing him as somebody close to him that he could trust. This would prove to be very true for Philip, as when in 337 BC, Alexander's sister Olympias requested that her brother attack Macedon over court drama. He declined, instead deciding to further his alliance with Philip. He solidified this by marrying Philip's daughter, his own niece named Cleopatra. Tragedy would soon strike though, as Philip would be murdered by his bodyguard Porcianus at their wedding. In 334 BC, opportunity would arise for Alexander, as the Greek city of Taras in Magna Graecia requested his support in their defence against the Italic peoples. The Bruttians and the Lucanians, two local tribes, had been giving the Greeks much to fret over. For those settling Magna Graecia, the situation looked grim. Throughout the previous decades, multiple Greek cities such as Tyrrhena in what is now Calabria would fall to these peoples, and fearing the annihilation of the Greek settlements in Italy, they looked towards Epirus for support. Before deciding whether to embark on this campaign, Alexander sought out the oracle of Dodona, and was informed that he should beware the river Acheron and the city of Pandosia. Since both of these were in Epirus, Alexander was quite confident that there was nothing to fear in going forth with the expedition. In 333 BC, Alexander gathered his army and landed in the city of Tarentum, being met with fresh troops and funds. He would go on to campaign against the Messapians and the Dornians in Apulia, taking the city of Sapontum. From there he drove the Samnites into Lucania and defeated them in a pitched battle at Paestum, prompting an alliance with the early Romans. Alexander would then go on to take the city of Metapontum from the Messapians, and Heraclea, a former Tarentine colony, from the Lucanians. The same year, Alexander would move forth into Bruttium, what is now modern-day Calabria, taking Cosentia and Tyrrhena. Whilst happy with gaining dominion over his new holdings, relations soon soured following his latter conquests in Bruttium, and the Tarentines started to catch on with his plans for an empire. Tensions only rose even more after Alexander transferred a Philhellenic festival from Heraclea to Thurii. Nonetheless, Alexander was ready for a renewed assault against the Lucanians and the Bruttians. In 331 BC, Alexander positioned his army on the Lucanian-Bruttian border. He prepared to meet an allied Italic force which had been raised by a local town, unknown to him, named Pandosia. Alexander had his army split into thirds along 3 hills near the town. Alexander was on the central hill, and accompanying his main army were 200 Lucanian exiles who he brought along as auxiliary troops. Little did he know that the exiles had been in communication with the Italic troops, promising to bring Alexander to them dead or alive, that they might have their banishments lifted and their property returned. It had appeared that Alexander's luck had run thin, as a heavy rainstorm resulted in the flooding of the fields between the hills, rendering his troops unable to reinforce or coordinate properly with each other. Taking advantage of the flood and coordinating with the auxiliaries, the Italic army attacked the two detachments of Alexander's infantry on the hills to his left and right flanks. Unlike the Epirotes who fought in the phalanx style of combat, the Italians fought in a much more manoeuvrable way, which would later be known as the manipular system, once adopted by the Romans. The Italic army also relied on light skirmish units such as javelin men, who would pelt their enemies from a safe distance. This would be extremely effective against the Epirote troops, their phalanxes making them sitting ducks. Due to the amount of shock caused by the Italic advance, in addition to the uneven terrain preventing Alexander's army from properly organising, the Epirote troops on the flanking hills were absolutely annihilated. There was nothing that Alexander could do, as the flooding between the hills made it impossible to move his centre line in an orderly fashion. The enemy forces, once finished with the flanks, then proceeded to blockade the hill that Alexander was on in hopes of a surrender. Yet, out of sheer desperation, Alexander and a small group were able to break past the Italic siege on their position, killing the Lucanian general while trying to withdraw to safety. Alexander then attempted to rally what men he had left and cross at a nearby river, making it back to safer territory. He knew his troops were being pursued by the Lucanians and that time was of the essence. Consequently, he ordered his troops to cross at a quickened pace over the river. However, when hearing that the name of the river was the Acheron, Alexander hesitated, remembering the oracle's foretellings. When he saw the Lucanians approaching, he stopped pondering and jolted back to reality, moving on horseback to cross the river himself. Due to his initial hesitation, a Lucanian javelinman was able to catch up to him and hit him through the chest, impaling him as he was crossing the river. According to the historian Livius, in the aftermath of the battle, his body was mutilated by the victors, brutally cutting his drenched corpse in half. They sent one half to Cassentia, while the other was cremated and sent to Epirus in exchange for Italic prisoners. It is also said that upon hearing the death of his uncle, Alexander the Great for a short time fell into a deep depression. Alexander the Molossian's campaign and subsequent defeat marked the beginning of the end for the Greeks in Magna Graecia, as the establishment of new colonies ceased and the remaining cities became isolated and were slowly conquered by the Italic tribes. In the near future, this battle would be cited by many military scholars of Rome, acting as demonstration for them on how to properly deal with the Greco-Macedonian phalanxes. Legend holds that as Alexander lay there dying on the banks of the river, he pondered his fortunes in comparison to those of his nephews. He said in his dying breath that his nephew waged war against women, referring to the rather tame nature of the Achaemenid Empire to the east in comparison to the savages that he endured in Italy. Thank you for watching our video on Alexander the Molossian and the Battle of Pandosia. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and a subscribe to our channel, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you again, and we hope to see you all next time.